This week's vocabulary is a selection of terms that you need to know. We're going to go ahead and begin with knowledge of words, word selection, and term number 1, insinuate. If I insinuate something, I am saying it without necessarily saying it. To insinuate is to suggest something in a very subtle or indirect way. An example sentence that might help a little bit with that is that she insinuated that her boss was stealing from the company, but she never said it outright. If you are insinuating something, you don't necessarily want to be the one to say something out loud, so you might hint at it to try to give it away. Term number 2 is futile. Futility means having no useful result or effect. If something is futile, it's not really getting anything accomplished. An example sentence would be trying to fix the golden vase with glue was futile. It just fell apart again. No matter how hard you try to get that stone up the hill, it's just going to roll back down again. You're never going to succeed in getting it back to the top. Term number 3 is going to be obstinate. When I think of obstinate, I think of a donkey or trying to get an animal to move and not getting it to move because it doesn't want to. Obstinate means stubbornly refusing to change one's mind or course of action. An example sentence would be he was obstinate in his belief that the earth was flat, despite the fact that all the evidence was out there to prove that he was completely wrong. He still stuck to his ridiculous beliefs. You may think of like a really old person being obstinate. Maybe they don't want to use technology because they're not a big fan of it, and so they will obstinately refuse to use a cell phone even when prompted and showed how to use it. Term number 4 is going to be joyous. This is probably one of the easier terms from our list this week. You know what joy is, and you know that joyous means feeling or showing great pleasure and happiness. An example sentence with joyous would be, the children were joyous on Christmas morning when they saw all the presents. Think of joy as sort of an elevated way to say happiness. It's taking it to the next step. It's a more descriptive term and a better one. It sort of paints a better picture. Now let's paint a picture of term number 5, gangly. If you imagine the word gangly, think of someone who's a little bit awkward in how they stand and look. Gangly means tall and thin in an awkward or ungainly way. An example sentence would be, the gangly teenager was always tripping over his own feet. Think of somebody who's sort of grown so quickly that they're not completely used to their body and thus running into stuff or knocking things over and just generally being awkward. Term number 6 is banquet. A banquet sounds nice right now, especially if you're hungry, because a banquet is a formal meal with many courses, usually accompanied by speeches and entertainment. An example sentence to go with that would be that the banquet in honor of the retiring CEO was held at a fancy hotel. A banquet is another step above a meal. Think of people dressed up in their best, going and having a meal that probably lasts quite a while, has lots of different courses or different food selections that they can make, and usually is in a fancier setting. Term number 6 is restless. If you are restless, you can't sit still, you can't stop moving. Restless means unable to relax or sit still, to be constantly moving. An example sentence would be, the restless toddler was always running around and getting into things. When I think of people being restless, I do tend to think of toddlers or very little kids who cannot sit still. They're going to be constantly restless. Term number 8 is to flourish. Hopefully you're flourishing right now and having a fantastic week. To flourish is to grow, to develop well, or to be successful. An example sentence would be, the business flourished under the new management. They got some new people in. They're running things great. They're making lots of money. They are flourishing. You hear this word a lot with planting things. Maybe you plant it in a particularly good place. It's got really great soil. It's got perfect sunlight. It's getting the amount of water it needs. That plant is flourishing and blooming and looking awesome. Term number 9 is to conserve. If you conserve things, you try to make them last as long as possible. To conserve something is to protect and preserve something from harm or destruction. An example sentence would be, the organization's goal is to conserve endangered species. They're trying to help those species come back. They're trying to help them flourish and repopulate and become something that's everywhere again. You hear this word a lot with like an environmental connection, so we've got to preserve the resources we have to preserve the planet, etc. It's to try to save it and help it for future generations. Term number 10 this week is abandon. And the definition of abandon is going to be to leave something or someone permanently or to give up on something. An example sentence would be, he abandoned his car on the side of the road and walked home. The poor car, left all by its lonesome in the dark. If you abandon something, you leave it. You don't want it anymore, or maybe you can't use it anymore. Maybe that person is just locked out of their car for some reason, and they have to abandon it and go home so they can get the keys. But either way, they're still leaving it. A lot of the times it's permanent, and a lot of the times it's temporary, but either way, if you leave it, you've abandoned it. Those are our 10 terms and definitions for this week. Please feel free to go back and review the video if you need to see those terms and definitions again, and good luck.